There are increased hopes for more international cooperation over Syria. Now, this follows Iran allowing Russia to use an air base and China now saying that it will offer military help to the Syrian government. Here's RT's Ganish Chikan with details.
We're learning that China is seeking closer military ties with Syria. A senior Chinese military official just visited Damascus, where he met with the Syrian defense minister. According to the agency, the Chinese and Syrian officials also talked about the possibility for China to provide military training and humanitarian aid to Syria. This talk about the possibility of China providing military training to Syrian government forces marks a change in China's more detached approach to the war in Syria. China had previously praised Russia's role there, but it may now provide more specific support to the fight against terrorists. The Chinese news agency also reported that while in Damascus, the Chinese military official also met with the Russian general. So you have a potential alliance forming not only with China, but also with Iran. This weekend, Russian jets delivered their first airstrikes on terrorist targets in Syria, operating from an Iranian airbase. The bombers took off from Hamadan airfield to attack ISIL and al-Nusra facilities in Aleppo, Deir ez-Zor, and Idlib provinces. The Russian Defense Ministry said the strikes had eliminated 5 major terrorist weapons depots and training compounds in the area. So you have a strategic cooperation between Russia and Iran in Syria, and we may now add China to that alliance. The difference between this alliance and the U.S.-led anti-ISIL coalition would be that to go after terrorists, Russia, Iran, and China are supporting the Syrian army, while the U.S.-led coalition is supporting rebel forces in Syria. The problem is those rebel forces sometimes join forces with terrorists, and it becomes difficult to distinguish them from terrorists.
Until now, the largest international force fighting in Syria was the coalition headed by the US. It also comprises the UK, France, Saudi Arabia and numerous other countries backing the rebels. But recent developments point at the possible rise of a new coalition, one supporting the government forces. Iran's already on board, but it could also include China as well as Turkey, particularly after the recent breakthrough in relations between Moscow and Ankara. Let's discuss this story in more detail now. We can cross live to guest Andrew Lung, who's an independent China strategist. Welcome, Andrew. So the report is that China has promised military assistance to the Syrian government. If that's the case, how extensive, though, because this is important, how extensive do you think that military assistance would be?
Well, this is really a breakthrough in China's strategies in the Middle East. And that appears to be more coordination with countries like Russia. I think that this is greatly in China's interest to stabilize the region. There are 3 kind of reasons. The first, of course, is China sees herself as one of the great powers, and as befitting her status as a great power, there is the responsibility to maintain peace and stability in a very important region in the world. And indeed, China has already fielding the largest peacekeeping force in the United Nations. But as far as the Middle East is concerned, it means even more to China, because that is a matter of energy security. A lot of the energy from the Gulf is affected by instability in Syria and in other regions. And thirdly, of course, China has recently launched this One Belt, One Road initiative, connecting Central Asia, certain parts in the Middle East and Europe to China through infrastructure. And this is China's grand plan, as it were. So from all these points of view, is it really in China's interest to play a larger role.
You say it's in China's interest, they're a major player in the region, but they're relatively late to this party, if I can use that reference. Why did they hold back so long?
Well, because in the beginning you can see that the whole region is in a great turmoil. There is not just a black and white kind of thing between the Western-led bloc, as it were, and the bloc led by Russia, but there are other forces at play, and the Middle East and Syria in particular is being used as a proxy theater for rivalry between the Shiites and the other side of the Islamic conflict. But also there are the terrorism and also the Kurds and various other tribal forces. So the whole situation is very complicated. And don't forget, China is facing a very serious internal problem herself. But now the situation seems to be clearer. And of course, at a time when the United States and other countries are looking inwards, it opens up the opportunity for countries like China and Russia really to be playing a larger role.
So first we have Iran helping Russia, then we have China getting involved. There's a lot of talk that Turkey too will provide some kind of assistance to the Russian side. Is it fair to call this a coalition? And if so, just how strong is it?
Well, in a way, there is definitely more coordination between these countries, China, Russia, and Turkey, who do not see really, toppling the Assad regime in Syria solves the problem. Of course, there are also vested interests, national interests at stake. For Russia, there is this military base in certain parts in Syria. For China, as I mentioned, there is energy security. For Russia, for Turkey, is the question of the how to resist the inroad of the Kurdish kind of regime. So there are various vested interests. But on the other hand, stabilizing the region actually plays into the interests of these three countries, in the sense that they'll be seen as solving a lot of the problems plaguing not just the Middle East, but mitigating the refugee problem, and it adds to their national prestige. But I don't think that there's a kind of military bloc against the West, because for the Western countries, they see that things can be solved just through the military. I think for both China and Russia, it's more complicated than that. I mean, you just can't use the only tool in the toolkit, which is like solving every problem seems like a nail that requires a big hammer. There are lots of ethnic, economic, cultural, religious, geographic kind of differences that need to be managed at first and to be addressed in a more comprehensive manner.
Andrew, good to hear your thoughts on this story. Thanks for joining us there from London. Andrew Lung is our guest, independent China strategist.